Good afternoon from Geneva and welcome to this webinar. My name is David Hanlon. I am the Secretary of the IEC Conformity Assessment Board, and this webinar is titled Want to Create Global Value? Talk to the BizL. The objective of this webinar is to discuss how standards and the IEC Global Conformity Assessment Services work together to create value for customers, manufacturers, governments, and many others. Whenever worldwide consistency of safety and quality are desired, the world's best practice used within the IEC Global Conformity Assessment Services can be applied. If your industry or market sector would benefit from consistent worldwide certification, then talk to the BizL. During this webinar, you have the opportunity to write questions into the question section of the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar control panel, and at the end of the presentation, I will be joined by Mr. Chris Aegis in Australia and Mr. Marty Cole from Canada, who will address those questions and any others that you may have. The IEC is, of course, the International Electrotechnical Commission. Most people know the IEC as an international standards development organization. And it is true that the IEC has been developing international standards since 1906. What is less known, however, is that the IEC has a second major activity. Since 1974, IEC has been operating worldwide global certification services, starting in electronic components. Standards with specific quality and performance requirements for products and services are of little value by themselves. Value is only created when it can be demonstrated that the requirements have been fulfilled. Conformity assessment is used to demonstrate that conformity has been achieved to the standard. In this way, standards and conformity assessment are like two sides of a coin. Neither side has value without the other side. Only together do standards and conformity assessment create value. As we all know, for products and services, standards are used for creating a baseline of minimum safety, quality, and performance. Hence the term substandard to communicate low or even dangerous quality. All of this is also true for conformity assessment. Conformity assessment is essentially a service which, like all services, can benefit from being standardized. Conformity assessment is testing, calibration, inspection, assessment, certification, and so on. Different types of conformity assessment can be performed by different parties. Conformity assessment can be performed by the manufacturer or supplier themselves. This is called first-party conformity assessment. In this case, a manufacturer or supplier makes a declaration of conformity, which is known as a supplier's declaration of conformity, or SDoC. Conformity assessment can be performed by the customer or end user. For example, in industry, this is done for incoming quality control. This is called second-party conformity assessment, and we all do this each time we purchase a product, take it home, and test it. We are doing informal second-party conformity assessment, usually not to formal requirements, but rather to our own personal satisfaction. Then there is, of course, conformity assessment performed by independent professional organizations. They are independent of the manufacturer and supplier, and they are also independent of the customer and the end user. They are like a judge in a court case, giving an impartial decision. This is third-party conformity assessment and often involves certification. The IEC has 4 global conformity assessment systems. The IECEE for home, office, medical, manufacturing, public spaces, smart grid, electrical vehicles, and so on. IECEx for all verification needs of the EX industry or explosives atmosphere sectors. IECQ for electronic components and supplier quality management, and the IECRE for renewable energy in the wind energy, marine energy, and PV solar energy sectors. All of these global CA services were developed and implemented because they were requested by the specific market sectors. It is those market sectors that pay for those services, and they do that because they obtain value for those services. The IECEE is a global CA system for electrotechnical goods. Its main and very long-running scheme is the CB scheme, and its main market driver is facilitating access to markets for manufacturers and suppliers. The IECEE has recently established a global conformity assessment service for cybersecurity, and IEC is working with the UN, with the United Nations Economic Committee for Europe, the UNECE, to create a United Nations Common Regulatory Objectives Guidelines document based on the IECEE cybersecurity activities. This is because these activities are considered to be the world's best practice at this time. The CB scheme creates value for manufacturers and for governments. The first and main market driver for the CB scheme is quicker and easier access to foreign markets for manufacturers' products. Under the CB scheme, their products only need to be tested once, and then the test result is recognized in all participating countries. Recognition of the test results then allows access to the foreign market. The alternative is testing in each country with months of lost time, lost sales, and lost market share. Other market drivers for manufacturers have also arisen, such as risk management for their products. Having their products certified shares the risk if something goes wrong. Another market driver is supplier qualification. For example, retailers may require products from unknown brand suppliers to certify their products before they will put them on their shelves. For governments, the CB scheme has two benefits. It ensures that products entering the market are safe for use, and it can help domestic manufacturers find foreign markets and thus assist in the economic development of the country. The recent cybersecurity certification service create value for asset owners by protecting their business. They create value for governments by protecting critical infrastructure, and they create value for manufacturers by providing easier access to foreign markets for products and services. The IECEx is a global CA system for explosive environments. It runs these four schemes. IECEx addresses all verification needs of the EX atmosphere industry. It covers design, planning, installation, inspection, maintenance and repair, and the assessment of the competence of personnel working in this highly specialized area. In 2011, the United Nations Economic Committee for Europe, the UNECE, published a common regulatory objectives model for the EX sector and endorsed the IECEx as a world's best practice. The IECEx Global Conformity Assessment services create value for asset owners, governments, and manufacturers. The IECEx Global CA services protect asset owners' business and their investment in their infrastructure. They also protect against the risk of harm to people and even death, and against harm to the environment. The IECEx Global CA services provide value to governments by lowering the risk of harm to its population and to the environment, by protecting critical infrastructure and thereby protecting local or national economy and facilitating its development. The IECEx Global CA services also provide value to manufacturers by providing faster and easier access to foreign markets for their products, risk management, and supplier qualification. IECQ is a global conformity assessment service for supply chain qualification in the electronics sector. IECQ helps industry, including, for example, the LED lighting or LED lighting industry, the automotive industry, and the avionics industry to efficiently manage their electronic components supply chain. We all travel around the world in aircraft made safer because of the IECQ. The IECQ creates value for the suppliers of electronic components, assemblies, and services, and the IECQ creates value for the customers of those suppliers, of those components, assemblies, and services to manufacture electronic and electronic products. The main market driver for the IECQ Global CA service is to lower the cost for supplier qualifications. It is a business-to-business service. In the past, an electronic product manufacturer would have to audit multiple suppliers before choosing one or two. This was time-consuming and costly, especially if the supplier was on the other side of the world. The component suppliers also had to be audited by multiple potential customers, which also cost them time and took them away from their core business. And what was worse was that once they had been selected by a supplier, as a supplier by different customers, they had to adopt multiple different quality management requirements according to each customer. This, of course, was very inefficient for their operations. The IECQ supplier's certification imposes one harmonized quality management system and requires that the supplier only be audited by one body, although regular surveillance audits are also part of the certification process. Having an IECQ supplier's certificate helps component suppliers access more markets. Other IECQ Global CA services, such as the Hazardous Substances Process Management Scheme, or HSPM, provide value to both governments and asset owners by protecting populations and the environment from dangerous substances. This HSPM scheme also helps manufacturers limit their risk of hazardous substances entering their supply chain. IECQ supplier qualification allow both the component supplier and the product manufacturer to save time, money, and allow them to concentrate on their core business. The IECRE is a global CA system for renewable energy and covers the sectors of wind energy, marine energy, and solar photovoltaic energy. The market driver in the renewable energy sector is financial risk management. Anticipated investment in renewable energies over the next 30 years is in the trillions of dollars. Renewable energy projects are very big, very high cost projects. They're very long-term investments with a long-term return on investment. Investors and insurers wish to limit their investment risk by applying world's best practices. The IEC's Global Conformity Assessment services are considered as the current world's best practices. So the main market driver for the IECRE Global CA service comes from financial investors and insurers. And the value that the IECRE Global CA services provide to them is better financial risk management. This is the main market driver, but there are also others. IECRE certification also provides easier and faster access to foreign markets for OEM suppliers. IECRE certification also provides assurance to governments for their investment of taxpayers' money in renewable energy projects and the economic development that this can bring to their countries. A future benefit that will bring value to asset owners of wind farms and solar PV farms and so on will be to have their ongoing management, maintenance and operational practices audited, assessed and certified in order to reduce insurance premiums. So all of the IEC CA systems are based on market drivers. All of the IEC CA services are responding to market needs. Those needs are in a global, worldwide context. The services have been requested by the various market sectors. The services are paid for by the various market sectors because those market sectors see and believe they are getting value for their money. The question then can be asked, can the IEC Global CA services bring value to your market sector? In the next part of the webinar, we are going to look at how the IEC CA systems create value, and therefore why they are considered to be a world's best practice. The IEC Global CA systems create a framework into which professional certification bodies, testing laboratories, inspection bodies, auditing bodies, and so on from around the world come together in a team structure. IEC does not do testing or certification itself. Rather, it is the professional bodies that do this. This is very similar to the way in which standards are developed by both IEC and ISO. Neither organization actually writes technical standards themselves. Rather, it is the subject matter experts from around the world who come and participate in the standards development process who actually write the standards. The fundamental value that the IEC Global CA systems create is consistent and comparable conformity assessment results from anywhere in the world. This is achieved through two activities. Firstly, all of the participants come together to determine a common understanding and interpretation of the standards, which they document, as well as common rules and methodologies for testing and assessment. Secondly, they conduct peer assessment to ensure that the common interpretation is understood correctly, and more importantly, that the common rules and methodologies are being applied. This achieves consistent, comparable CA results worldwide. You may then ask, what is the role of accreditation? Accreditation is simply a national authority recognizing that a conformity assessment body, or CAB, has the competency to issue meaningful test reports and/or certificates for a specific scope of work. Accreditation is always national, but is sometimes recognized across borders. In countries where there is doubt about the value of certificates, or where there is or can be doubt about the quality and competency of a body issuing a certificate, then accreditation is an added assurance and confidence builder that the certificate does in fact have value. Accreditation is a way of checking the checkers. Accreditation is national. Within a country, a national accreditation body, or NAB, is appointed. The NAB has authority to accredit conformity assessment bodies such as testing laboratories and certification bodies. Once accredited, the conformity assessment results must be recognized by the national authority. A conformity assessment body can be accredited in its own country or accredited by a NAB from another country. In this case, the CA results for the scope of work that is accredited must be recognized by the corresponding national authorities in the respective countries. The work of conformity assessment of a conformity assessment body may cover a wide range of scopes. Accreditation may cover multiple scopes of work. Strictly speaking, it is therefore incorrect to speak about an accredited laboratory or an accredited certification body. Rather, a laboratory accredited for a scope of work, and so on. The CA results covered under the accredited scope must be recognized by the national authority of the national accreditation bodies that accredited them. But the CA results that are not covered under the accredited scope do not have to be recognized by the national authority. Although accreditation has its value, it also has limitations. In the real world, standards are not perfect, They are consensus-based, and therefore they often have wiggle room. This means that conformity assessment results can depend on the interpretation of the standard. They can also depend on the experience of an assessor and to the choice by the CAB of testing or inspection methodology, and so on. Therefore, in the real world, third-party testing, inspection, and certification is not consistent and comparable. In the real world, there are competent CABs that interpret standards too strongly. There are competent CABs that interpret standards too weakly. There are competent CABs that interpret standards correctly. There are incompetent CABs and there are fraudulent CABs. Accreditation should filter out those CABs that are incompetent and fraudulent, but it will have no effect on the inconsistent results coming from the various interpretations and applications of the standards. Accreditation is national and is applied to conformity assessment bodies as individual entities. Accreditation is not applied to CABs operating in groups, whether the group is within the same company or whether the group is formed by different commercial entities. To achieve consistent results across different CABs that are operating together in a group, it requires more than accreditation. In this respect, accreditation creates no added value to achieving consistent results within a group of CABs. Accreditation is national. Within a country, the national accreditation body most often applies its accreditation processes in a consistent way. Therefore, within a country, two CABs accredited for the same scope of work will most often be competent to the same degree. However, between nations, the accreditation process can be quite different. This means that the competency of a CAB in one country can be very different from the competency of a CAB in another country, even though they were both accredited for the same scope of work within their own countries. This variance reduces confidence in results coming from CABs in other countries. Accreditation is analogous to driving tests. The driving requirements to obtain a driver's license in one country can be very different from the requirements in another country. But even if the competency of the drivers may be very different, in the end, they both have national driver's licenses. There is no such thing as international accreditation. Accreditation is national. However, national authorities can choose to recognize CA results from CABs in other countries if they have confidence that those CABs are competent. If those CABs are accredited and if the national accreditation processes are equivalent, then the confidence in the CA results can be higher. ILAC, the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation, and IAF, the International Accreditation Forum, are two organizations that are working towards the goal of achieving consistent accreditation methods across the national accreditation bodies of different countries. Global harmonized accreditation would add value by making the process of accreditation auditing more consistent and universally applied in different countries, which should result in more consistent levels of competency and therefore more consistent and comparable CA results. The ultimate goal is that certificates and test reports issued in different nations will be recognized in other nations. Using the driver's license analogy, this is like trying to have the same driving test requirements in all countries. But having the same driving test in each country will not make all the drivers drive the same way on the same roads. This is the reality of accreditation. It also shows where the IEC Global CA systems create value beyond accreditation. The approach taken by the IEC Global CA systems is to train all the drivers to drive the same way on the same roads. The IEC Global CA systems achieve consistent, comparable CA results worldwide. This is why IEC Global CA systems are considered to be a world's best practice. Accreditation is an essential element in the world of conformity assessment. It is the basis for recognizing competency within a country and therefore recognizing a conformity assessment result. Accreditation can be likened to qualification for individual activities. A good example is a musician. Accreditation would check if they have an instrument. Can they read music? Can they play the music correctly? Accreditation would not check the choice of music to play, nor the tempo or style in which it is played. On the other hand, peer assessment is all about qualifying for team activities. Again, for a musician, the basic ability to play an instrument must of course be present. But to play in an orchestra and make beautiful music together requires much more. It requires the ability to play with the other musicians in the orchestra the same music in a harmonized way in accordance with the rhythm and instructions of the conductor. Each musician needs to be confident in the abilities of the other musicians. To achieve this, musicians go through auditions where musicians check musicians, or in other words, they do peer assessment. That's what creates the confidence and allows them to play as a team. As we have seen, accreditation is national. The national authority must recognize the CA results from a conformity assessment body that has been accredited by its national accreditation body. ILAC and IAF try to achieve global harmonized accreditation auditing. ILAC and IAF use peer assessment by the NABs to ensure consistent accreditation auditing across nations. Their objective is to reduce the wiggle room, the variation in the accreditation process from one country to another. IEC does the same, but directly at the level of the CABs. The IEC objective is to get consistent conformity assessment results, no matter from where they come in the world. This is essential for the success of the IEC Multilateral Mutual Recognition Agreement. Both ILAC and IEF and IEC are trying to achieve the same result of mutual recognition of conformity assessment results, and therefore of acceptance of foreign products into domestic markets. The way ILAC and IAF go about trying to achieve this is through consistent accreditation across countries. If the CABs are equally accredited, then the theory goes that their results should be of equal value and therefore equally believable. Therefore, the national authority should accept the results from other countries. The IEC's approach is that the CABs themselves should accept the CA results coming from other participating CABs in other countries, and because they are accredited, the national authority must accept their judgment. The reason that a CAB in one country will accept the results from a participating CAB in another country is because the IEC CA Systems operational model ensures that all the CABs are doing the work in the same way and would get the same result if they did it themselves. Again, using the driver's license analogy, ILAC and IAF are trying to get consistent and harmonized driver's tests. This is good, but will not get drivers to drive the same way on the same roads. The IEC CA Systems goal is to directly train the drivers to drive the same way. For the IEC CA Systems, mutual recognition only has value if those doing the recognizing are themselves recognized within their own country. National accreditation is a recognition of competence and a guarantee that the results issued will be recognized in the country. If a nationally accredited body then recognizes the results from a foreign body, this is the doorway to the national market. IEC helps industry get access to foreign markets. It does this by operating international certification schemes. Products are tested and services assessed by commercial conformity assessment bodies anywhere in the world, and the results are recognized everywhere in the world. An IEC CA certificate is like a passport to the world. So we've seen that the IEC Global CA Systems already provide these types of certification services in specific domains. We have also seen that the value created is consistent, comparable, and believable conformity assessment results from anywhere in the world. The question can again be asked, can the IEC Global CA services bring value to your market sector? To find this out, you should talk to the BizL. The BizL is the Future Business Master Watch List. It is a forward-looking radar used to identify and track potential new global conformity assessment services that could be provided by the IEC. If a market sector has needs, or if they could gain value from global CA services, then they only need to contact the BizL and to open a dialogue. Together, we will understand the issues. Together, we will decide if global services are appropriate or not. Together, we will define and incubate the necessary services. Together, we will choose the best time to launch those services, and together, we will create value for your market sector. The current BizL list can be found on the IEC website in the standing documents section of the CAB webpage. This is the rather unfortunate URL. Currently, the BizL has identified about 30 potential areas where value could be created from global conformity assessment services. These include expanding the existing cybersecurity services, CA services for physical security products, LVDC applications, services for wearables, services for products with radio functions and IoT devices, and so on. If your market could benefit from world market access, worldwide consistent product quality, protection of infrastructure investment, financial investment risk management, greater choice of high quality products, services or suppliers, obtaining approved supplier status, legitimization of government subsidies, and much more, then talk to the BizL. Whatever the business drivers may be in your market sector, if your needs are at the international level, then the BizL can help you. The BizL is the forward-looking radar and the first step towards establishing an IEC Global certification scheme. Contact us and open a dialogue. This could lead to many opportunities to help your market sector to grow. So we've come to the end of the presentation section, and we would now be very happy to receive your any questions that you may have, and you can do that by writing them into the questions section of the webinar control panel. And at this stage, I'd also like to introduce to you the two other people that are here to answer your questions and also to discuss this issue, which are Chris Aegis, who is in Australia, and Marty Cole, who is in Canada. Hello, Chris, and hello, Marty.
Oh, hello, David. Chris Aegis here. Hello, everyone.
Marty, are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry, my machine decided it would do something and shut down.
Okay. So we have So at the moment we have no specific questions. However, I'd like you maybe to talk about your experience using the IEC CA systems and the value that they create to the various market sectors in which you are involved. So Marty, could you please give us some information about this?
Well, as a manufacturer, we have an issue where in the past we had to go to certification agency per country, and that meant repeating the tests in every single country that we do, and that testing can be quite expensive. What the Conformity Assessment System does is, since it allows us to do testing in one location and share that data, we can accomplish certifications from multiple countries with a single set of tests in many cases. There are, of course, country deviations that we have to follow, but it certainly takes the bulk of the cost away from the manufacturer. So for us, it's an excellent, these are excellent systems to use.
So that's a manufacturer's perspective. Chris, what can you say?
I think, David, from the IEC's conformity assessment perspective, and I think you touched on this throughout your presentation, and I really need to certainly highlight these, and that is the core fundamentals of IEC conformity assessment systems. And the fundamentals are that all bodies, regardless whether they are certification bodies or test bodies, they are all qualified according to the same set of requirements using the same processes worldwide. Now, with accreditation in different countries, that is done differently by the different agencies in each country. Under IEC, it's done a single way. So that's the first element, and that is that all bodies are accepted, assessed, qualified according to the same set of rules and process. The second thing is that once a laboratory or certification body is accepted and joins one of the IEC certification schemes, they must adopt the standardized procedures, standard operating procedures that are developed within IEC. So in other words, the certification, the testing must be done exactly the same way by all laboratories and certification bodies, regardless of where they're located. So that's the second core element. The third core element is the system of reporting. Now, they must report using the same standardized test report format, the same standardized certificate format is used across all of the certification bodies and the test laboratories, again, regardless where they're located. And the final element is the use of IT. Now, this is where, under the IEC certification schemes, we make the greatest use of IT by providing a mechanism which we call the online certificate system, whereby you only need, or industry only need, to visit one website, the IEC website, one website, to look for products that are certified, tested, or services that are certified, or persons that are certified. Only need to look at the one website to check whether a certificate has been issued, regardless of which agency has issued that certificate. Now, for example, in some of our IEC schemes, we have close to 100 different certification bodies, all issuing certificates. Now, think for a moment, if you were in industry and you needed to check whether or not a product or a service was certified, and you had to check 100 different websites, it would be a nightmare. Under the IEC schemes, you only need to visit the one website, and as we say, if the certificate is not showing, then it's not certified. So please bear in mind those four fundamental principles upon which all of our IEC certification activities built on. Now, I do notice, David, that we do have, I'm not sure if you call them questions or comments, but I can see several of them, and I'm just looking at, take the first one that talks about cyber security. And I think, well, if that is a question asking, is IEC involved in cybersecurity? The answer is certainly yes, and that is on a couple of platforms. In terms of the standards development area, yes, we have standards addressing cybersecurity aspects. On the certification side, yes, we have the IECEE that is providing a certification program according to the IEC 62443 series of standards. And we also have the IECQE that's also integrating the well-established joint ISO IEC 27000 series of standards into its certification platform and regime. I think the next item I can see there, David, energy efficiency.
Yes.
We have discussed energy efficiency within IEC over the years, and we find that that's a very heavily regulated field, and also one in which there are many, many, many different national regulatory requirements. So until we can harmonise those regulatory requirements, having a global scheme on energy efficiency is certainly a challenge, but certainly one that IEC is certainly keeping a watchful brief on.
Again, the services that the IEC actually operates today are driven by the market. And in energy efficiency, as you say, there is too much differences between each of the countries to really have to warrant an international scheme at this stage. If there is some form of alignment between the different countries with their regulatory systems for energy efficiency, then it may then become the case that IEC will be asked to implement a global worldwide system to do that. So I'm just looking down there. There's a question that says, could you please explain in more detail first and second party certification?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that first and second party certification does not exist, because certification is only third party. When a first party, when a manufacturer or a supplier does his own conformity assessment and he determines that he is conformant with the standard, he then has to make a declaration. He cannot self-certify that under the terms of the terminology, international standardized terminology under the ISO IEC 17000 series of standards, which are the standards that determine the international terminology for conformity assessment. Certification is only a third-party activity. It can never be performed by a first party, meaning a manufacturer or supplier, and it can never be performed by a second party, meaning an end user or a customer. So it is always by an independent third party, independent of the first party and independent of the second party. So
I think, David,
that's the first thing.
So I was just going to touch on that, David.
Yeah.
I think you rightly point out the importance of terminology, and I think we all need to, as you rightly point out, David, we need to, when we're talking about conformity assessment, please remember the standard joint ISO IEC standard, ISO/IEC 17000, 17000, that standard sets out the terminology of the agreed definitions of the terms that we use in conformity assessment, as David has highlighted. I think what has driven this question is, while we have these formal definitions, we also have what we call practical definitions in the marketplace. And unfortunately, the terms are used, first party, second party, and third party. And perhaps a very simple analogy is if you're looking to purchase a motor vehicle, and if someone, call it person A, is looking to purchase a motor vehicle from person B, and person A does not even look at the motor vehicle, but solely relies on the declaration from person B, then that could be regarded somewhat as first party, so that you're relying solely on the first party to give their confirmation that the motor vehicle is in working order and everything's okay. A second party is where the buyer actually goes along, looks at the vehicle, opens up the bonnet, pulls out the dipstick, checks the oil, takes the car for a drive, and makes their own judgment. And as David mentioned before, second party is something that we do daily when we purchase goods and services. Now, third party is where the buyer says, well, gee, I really don't have the competence to evaluate the motor vehicle, so I'm going to hire a mechanic or rely on some other expert to assess the vehicle for me, and I will make my decision based on their judgment. That is where the third party conformity assessment or third party certification comes in. As David said, it is independent from the seller and from the buyer. So I hope that helps explain. Thank you, David. Over to you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just having a little cough. Yeah, absolutely. Your description is spot on. First party is the supplier or the manufacturer making and if they have done their own assessment of conformity to the standard and they make a claim about that, that is first party conformity assessment. And second party, of course, is we, the customer, who make our own assessment, and it may be to formal requirements or it may be just to our own satisfaction. And as you said, when we as a customer don't have the expertise and we need it, or when a manufacturer wants to show that it's not just them making the claim, but there is an expert, an independent expert that will also back up their claim, then that is where third-party conformity assessment or certification is often used. And of course, third-party certification or third-party conformity assessment can be used for multiple reasons. And as my presentation gave, there are many market drivers for the various different CA systems that we have that are operating today. One of the main ones is access to markets for goods, and of course for those that are in those markets, they want to make sure that their products are safe, that the products that are coming from outside of their country are safe and of good quality and have a good performance, energy efficiency or whatever. And this is where having the products certified, certainly within a system like the IEC, which is a system where the results are always consistent no matter where they come from in the world, they are much more believable, and you can have confidence in those results. And this is the value that the IEC creates. But in other situations, the reason that companies have their products certified is not only because of requirements in various countries. It may also be for marketing reasons, that they wish to show that it's not only their own claim, but they have support from a third party, from an expert third party, that their claims are correct. It can be, as I gave in the presentation, to ensure that best practices are being used and therefore manage risk, either risk of harm and injury to people or to the environment, risk to infrastructure, risk to the economy of a country, or financial risk. So these are also market drivers. These are the reasons that companies have their products and services certified, and certainly certified within our CA systems. Some of the future potential services of various sectors that we are talking about, one of those is wearables, which is products that we wear on our persons, One of the very current sort of products is the watch that we tend to wear, which measures our walking around and our heartbeat and our respiration and these sorts of things, and tracks our health, if you like. The data from that, the fact that it is on our body, wearables like this, these sorts of products have to be accurate and have to tell a correct story about ourselves. They have to make sure that the data that they are collecting and transmitting to other systems remains private and only gets to the correct systems and not other systems. These are the sorts of products that will need to be, people will need to have assurances about in the future. And when elderly people, for example, have these sorts of products on them, and those products are subsidized by the government, essentially by taxpayers' money, those products will have to have been legitimized for those subsidies, which means those products will have to, and any services that goes along with those products will have to have been assessed for conformity and for the various requirements, and probably certified. And if those products are coming from overseas, then those products will have to be certified before they can be used and then subsidized by taxpayers' money within a country. So these are the sorts of market drivers that we anticipate and that we are talking with various market sectors at this time. Whenever it is a global context, whenever certification is the tool to be used to show conformity, then the IEC really does have a role to play and can really add value to your market sector. So this is why we say, come and talk to us, and we will be able to assist you in creating value for your market sector. Marty, do you have anything to add?
Just one thing, when you're talking about the value of the certification, is from an industrial perspective. When they can show a third-party certification of some sort to the IEC, that helps them fulfill their legal obligations for liability of the facility and people in it, so that the insurance companies as well are going to be looking for third-party assessments as opposed to first or second-party assessments in many cases. So those kinds of things all help us. I missed that when you were shortly after Chris was talking.
Yeah, well, yes, I did actually mention something like that, certainly in the IECRE section. But yes, it can be applied into many other applications, into many other situations where
when you look at
companies, industrial situations,
system,
exactly, when they are insured, showing that they are actually using world's best practices in their operation and maintenance and programs can, limit the risk and therefore reduce insurance premiums and things like this.
Right. So when you look at, certainly when you look at something like IECEx, for example, those are critical industries. When something goes wrong, it can go very wrong. And that kind of endorsement from an IECEx type certificate for those industries where hazardous materials are present certainly helps them greatly in that. So those are looking for that kind of certification.
Exactly. Okay, we're just about finished here today. Do you have any last things to say, Chris?
No, just to echo your sentiments, David, that in terms of conformity assessment activities within the IEC, we're certainly here to serve the needs of industry, but also addressing the regulatory requirements from our regulators, and we do that on several fronts, and we continue to expand in our services. I did note that on the question side there is, I don't know if it's a question, but I see there IEC, ISO, IT. I'm just wondering if that's a question of who are the three organisations or how do we cooperate? Okay. And there's a further one there on ICT infrastructure. So I don't know if that's something we need to address at this point, David. Thank you.
Well, it's a bit difficult to understand what it is that our auditor wishes to understand by those things, but certainly IEC, ISO and ITU, of course, are the considered to be the three international standards development organizations. The big difference, of course, with the IEC is that we also operate global conformity assessment schemes and systems, whereas ISO and ITU are they only develop standards. That's their only job. That's the only thing they do. IEC develops standards, but it also operates its conformity assessment systems. That is why the ITU actually came to the IEC a few years ago and asked the IEC to help the ITU create a scheme in a particular domain, and this is ongoing at this time because, of course, the ITU had no experience in that, and as ISO has no experience in actually operating conformity assessment schemes and systems, and this is why we held this webinar today also, to try and spread the message that we have these practices. We have been doing this since the early 70s, and we have many years of experience. We have the best practices. We are recognized in certain domains as the world's best practice, and so we can help many different sectors if their needs are at the international global level. They should certainly come and speak to us, and we will work with them to determine what is best for them, and we will help them put that in place, and then we will run it for them. Marty, do you have anything more to say?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so Chris, if you're happy with that, maybe we'll wind this up, and I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who has taken part, who has attended and participated in this webinar. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you for our attendees.
And thank you, David, for an excellent presentation and going through as you've done. Excellent work. Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, David, as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, and goodbye.